Welcome to the Nightmare EC Stormcaller tanking guide. I will be occasionally pausing the video to explain fight mechanics. My group has two ranged DPS and a healer on the inside of Storm. Both DPS are hitting Firebrand. This means that no one will be fighting me for aggro except for the healers. However, if you have a jug in the group who is saber reflecting the electric blue bubbles placed on the ground by the kiting healer, then you will have to be extra careful about aggro. The jug's saber reflect will do a lot of damage to Storm. Be very careful with your taunts and make sure to guard any jug who plans on doing this. Storm does have a frontal cleave attack, so be sure to slightly point him away from the raid. You do not want to accidentally clip your raid members. When Storm casts Double Destruction, you must quickly turn the boss so that the ranged DPS are between you and the head of the tank. They will get a blue debuff. When the cast is over, quickly move the head of the tank back to its original position. Storm will perform a frontal cleave shortly after Double Destruction. If it hits the ranged DPS, they will be one-shot. Also, during Double Destruction, you should taunt Firebrand and keep Firebrand focus targeted to make this easier. The Firebrand tank will taunt Firebrand back during the cast Incinerate Armor. When the cast is over, you will receive a debuff which decreases your armor. However, Storm will not do much damage after you receive this debuff, so it's okay. Other methods for this phase include having the Storm tank move back and having the DPS move between Storm and the tank to get Double Destruction. This method requires two people to move rather than one, which makes it more dangerous. Another method is to perform an actual tank swap when Incinerate Armor happens. The only thing about this method is that it is easy to not pay attention to Storm's positioning during the swap and accidentally letting Storm cleave the ranged DPS, one-shotting them immediately. A final method is that you can have a melee DPS taunt Firebrand instead of having Storm's tank do so. When Storm begins channeling defensive systems, Trandoshans will spawn either in front of, behind, or to the side of Storm. In this case, they are spawning in front of Storm. Use your minimap to easily identify where they are spawning. Make sure you do not get knocked into the Trandoshans. The ranged DPS and healer will need to stand under the shield the Trandoshans spawn. Instead, you will be running around the outside of the shield, dropping the electric blue bubbles. In this case, I move to the side of Storm and get knocked off there. During this phase, you should try to pack the bubbles together. To do this, I stop, wait for the hit which looks like a red target on my body, then start moving. This way, the bubbles will end up behind me as they drop where I was when I had the red target. If you wait for the bubble to drop on you before moving, you will take an extra tick or two of damage from the bubble. It is easy for tanks to die during this phase, so it is important to minimize your damage taken. I try to start away from the healer and then slowly move towards them. You won't need heals for the first bit of this phase, so drop as many bubbles as you can out of range of the healer before moving towards the shield to receive heals. It is essential that you do not LOS your healer once you are in range. You will be taking a lot of damage and LOSing the healer will interrupt their casts. So be careful with where you are, where the shield is located, and any obstructions in the way, such as the trees. Feel free to pop cooldowns as needed during this phase. Stay away from the Trandoshans as one of them will explode, creating AoE damage. If you have Firebrand focus targeted, you can watch the channel Mortar Volley. Once this channel is over, you can jump back onto Storm. You can also watch Storm's buffs. When defensive systems are over, Storm will lose his blue and white buff. The transition from the ground back onto the tanks is always rough, so make sure you use cooldowns during this part too. Again, I have Storm pointed off-center and away from the ranged DPS. Double Destruction goes out, I move to the ranged DPS, taunt Firebrand, and then move back to the front of Storm. This is followed by a frontal cleave from Storm and the Incinerate Armor debuff from Fire. Defensive systems begins, the Trandoshans are in the front, and I move to the side once again. Firebrand's mortar volley cast ends and I jump back onto Storm. I point him to the sides so that the ranged DPS who were in the front can jump back onto Storm without getting cleaved. Here the DPS push Firebrand so that defensive systems begins before double destruction goes out. Now the adds are to the outside of Storm and I am knocked towards the front. I do get close to the Trandoshans, but I am careful to watch their health so that I am not within melee range when they die. Defensive systems is over, and I keep Storm pointed towards the front so that the ranged DPS can jump onto Storm's outside and move to the inside without getting cleaved. Storm casts double destruction, I move to the ranged DPS, taunt fire, and move back to the front of Storm. The final defensive systems begins and the Trandoshans are once again in the front. I move to the side and continue along the same path as before. Defensive systems ends and all of the DPS move to Storm. The ranged DPS are on the outside and the melee DPS are on the inside. Now I keep Storm perfectly in the middle so that I do not cleave either side of the raid. The first double destruction goes out and I move to the inside like before. I also taunt Firebrand and bring Storm back to the front. I receive the Incinerate Armor debuff and continue attacking Storm. The second double destruction goes out and I move to the outside DPS since the inside DPS still have their debuff. If someone receives 2 stacks of double destruction, they will spectacularly blow up. Now you have to taunt Firebrand before the third double destruction starts. Here I taunted a little too early and as a result took extra damage. The third double destruction goes out, which I place on the melee DPS, and Incinerate Armor begins casting as well. I place the fourth double destruction on the ranged DPS. I wait a few seconds and taunt Firebrand to receive Incinerate Armor, which goes out before the fifth double destruction. And with that, Firebrand and Stormcaller are dead for the Empire.